morning, or good evening, good night, whatever it is for. Good morning, Jay. Good morning. What are you doing? No, at least Tiana is probably about to sleep. So we hope you're eating. Wait, also you did we hydrate and I never hydrated. I'm so sorry. I will hydrate. Here, here. I got some herbal tea too, but it's still a bit too hot to drink. Um, as usual, I turned off most of the video and I turned off sound alerts and everything like that, so we can fully focus on reading without any auditory distractions and get all comfy and free. We'll only look at chat sometimes when it's convenient to do so while reading, and won't be okay. Shall we start? Okay, okay. So last time we finished chapter 4. Now start up with chapter 5. Please enjoy, okay? Chapter 5. 2 visits and their consequences. Quickly passed the winter, still more quickly the merry summer following, and the new winter was already drawing to an end. Heidi was as happy and contented as the birds of the air, and rejoiced more and more every day in the approaching spring, when the warm south wind would blow through the fir trees and drive away the snow. Then the bright sunshine would call forth the blue and yellow flowers, and the days in the pasture would come again. What's going on? Oh, so sorry for the echo. Days which to Heidi brought the greatest pleasure that earth could give. Heidi was now in her 8th year. She had learned all sorts of handiwork from her grandfather. She could go around with the goats as if she were one of them, and Svenli and Barely followed her like trusty dogs, bleating loudly for joy if they merely heard her voice. This winter, Peter had already brought word twice from the schoolteacher in Durfleet that the uncle ought to send a child living with him to school, for she was more than old enough, and should have gone the winter before. The uncle had sent word back to the schoolteacher both times that, if he wanted anything of him, he would find him at home, but that he should not send a child to school. This message Peter had faithfully delivered. When the March sun had melted the snow on the slopes, and the snowdrops were in bloom everywhere in the valley, when the fir trees on the Alm had shaken off the burden of snow, and their branches again waved merrily, then Heidi in her delight kept running back and forth from the house to the goat shed, from the goat shed to the fir trees, and then into the hut to her grandfather to tell him how much larger the piece of green ground had grown under the trees, when she would immediately run back to look again, for she could not wait until everything should be green once more, and the lovely summer with its verdure and bloom returned to the mountain. One sunny March morning, when Heidi was running back and forth in this way, and was jumping over the threshold for about the 10th time, she nearly fell backwards into the house from fright. But suddenly there appeared before her an old man, all in black, who looked at her very earnestly. But when he saw how startled she was, he said kindly, "Must not be afraid of me. I love children. Give me your hand. You must be Heidi. Where is your grandfather?" "He is sitting at a table, carving round spoons out of wood," replied Heidi, opening the door. It was the old pastor from Durfleet, who had known the uncle well years before, when he still lived in the valley, and was one of his neighbors. He stepped into the hut, went up to the old man, who was bending over his wood carving, said, "Good morning, neighbor." Grandfather looked up in surprise. The next instant he rose and replied, "Good morning, Pastor." Then he offered him a stool, saying, "Pastor does not object to a wooden seat. Here is one." Pastor sat down. After a moment, he said, "I have not seen you for a long time, neighbor." "Nor have I seen you, Pastor," was the answer. "I come today to talk with you about something," continued the pastor. "I think you already know what the matter is which I am going to speak about. I want to hear what your intention is." The pastor remained silent and looked at the child standing in the doorway, attentively watching the new apparition. "Heidi, go out to the goats," said the grandfather. "You may take a little salt along and stay with them until I come." Heidi immediately disappeared. "The child should have been sent to school a year ago. She certainly ought to have gone this winter," said the pastor. "The teacher has sent you word about it, but you have made no reply. What do you intend to do with her, neighbor?" "I do not intend to send her to school," was the answer. The pastor looked in surprise at the old man, as he sat with folded arms on his bench, and looked very determined. "What are you going to make of the child?" then asked the pastor. "Nothing. She grows and thrives with the goats and the birds. She is well enough with them, and she learns no harm from them." "But the child is neither a goat nor a bird. She is a human being. She learns no harm from such companions, neither does she learn anything else. She ought to learn something, and the time for it has arrived. I've come to tell you now, neighbor, so that you may be able to think it over and make your arrangements during the summer. This is the last winter that the child can spend without any instruction. Next winter she must go to school, and every day." "I shall not do it, Pastor," said the old man decidedly. "Do you really suppose, then, that there is no means of bringing you to terms if you will persist so obstinately in your unreasonable behavior?" said the pastor somewhat warmly. "You have been about the world a great deal. You have had an opportunity to see and learn much, and I should give you credit for better sense, neighbor." "Indeed," said the old man, and his voice showed that he was no longer so perfectly calm in his mind. "And does it pay to suppose that I would really send a delicate child next winter on icy mornings, through storm and snow, down the mountain, 2 hours' journey, let her come back again at night? It often blusters and rages, so that any one of us would be lost in the wind and snow. Is she only a little child? Possibly the pastor can recall her mother, Adelheid. She used to walk in her sleep, to have ill turns. Shall the child, too, be made to suffer from such a struggle? Just let any one come and try to compel me. I will go into every court with her, and we shall see who is going to compel me." "You are quite right, neighbor," said the pastor with friendliness. "It would not be possible to send a child from here to school, but I can see that she is dear to you. For her sake, do what you ought to have done long ago. Come down into Dörfli and live once more with human beings. What kind of a life is this up here, alone and embittered toward God and man? If anything should happen to you up here, who would help you? I cannot understand in the least why you are not half frozen all winter long in your hut. How can the delicate child endure it?" "The child has young blood, good shelter. That I can assure you, Pastor. Moreover, I know where there is wood, and also when it is a good time to get it. Pastor ought to look into my shed. There's enough there so that the fire in my hut never goes out all winter long. It is not for me to go down into the valley as the pastor suggests. People down there despise me, and I despise them. But it's better for both that we remain apart." "No, no, it is not good for you. You know what the trouble is," said the pastor earnestly. "As to the people scorning you down in the valley, it is not so bad. Believe me, neighbor, seek to make peace with your God. Ask for his pardon if you have done any wrong. Then come and see how differently the people regard you. how well it can still be with you. The pastor rose, held out his hand to the old man, and said again, with heartiness, I count upon it, neighbor. Next winter you are to come down with us, for we are good old friends. I should feel sorry if you had to be forced. Give me your hand on it, that you will come down and live among us again, reconciled to God and man. The almanco gave his hand to the pastor, but said firmly and decidedly, the pastor means well toward me. I cannot do what he expects. That I tell him surely and finally. I shall not send a child, neither shall I come down myself. Then God help you, said the pastor, and went sadly out of the hut and down the mountain. The almanco was out of sorts. In the afternoon, when Heidi said, Now let us go to the grandmother's, he replied curtly, Not today. He did not speak again all day. On the following morning, when Heidi asked, Are we going to the grandmother's today? He still answered shortly and merely said, We shall see. Before the bowls had been put away after dinner, another visitor came to the door. It was Aunt Dete. She had on her head a fine hat with a feather in it, and a dress which swept up everything on the floor. In the hut lay all sorts of things which would not improve a dress. The uncle looked at her from top to toe, and said not a word. But Aunt Dete had a very friendly speech in her mind, for she immediately began to flatter him by saying that Heidi was looking so well that she hardly recognized her, and that it was plain to be seen that she had not fared ill with her grandfather. She had really always intended to take her away again, for she understood very well that the little one must be a trouble to him, but never at any time before had she been able to find a place for her. For day and night she had wondered how she could provide for the child, and today she had come because she had suddenly heard of something which would be such good luck to Heidi that she could hardly believe it. She had gone at once to see about the matter, and now she could say it was as good as settled, and not one in 100,000 was so fortunate as Heidi. Some very wealthy relatives of my mistress, who live in almost the finest house in all Frankfurt, have an only daughter who is obliged to sit all the time in a wheelchair. She is lame, and not well in other ways, so she is almost always alone and obliged to study alone with a teacher, which is very dull for her, and besides she would like to have a playmate in the house. This had been spoken about at her employer's house, and her mistress, who felt great sympathy for the little invalid, was anxious to find such a companion as the housekeeper described. The housekeeper had said she wanted an unspoiled child, not like those seen every day. Then Aunt Dete had at once thought of Heidi, and hastened immediately to tell her about the child and her character. The lady engaged to have her come. It was impossible to tell what good fortune was before Heidi, but when she was once there, if she pleased the people, and something might possibly happen to the only daughter. There was no knowing, she was so sickly, and if the people should not care to be left without any child, the most unheard of good luck might— Will you ever finish? Interrupted the uncle, who had not said a word all this time. Bah! Retorted Dete, tossing her head. You act exactly as if I had told you the most ordinary thing in the world, and there isn't a single person throughout all Prattigau who wouldn't thank God in heaven if I brought such news to them as I have brought to you. And take it to anyone you like. I will have none of it, said the uncle bluntly. Dete went off like a rocket and said, Well, if that is what you think about it, uncle, I will tell you what I think. The child is now 8 years old and can do nothing and knows nothing. You will not let her learn anything. You will not send her to school nor to church. That they told me down in Dörfli. And she is my own sister's child. I have to answer for what happens to her. When a child can have such good fortune as Heidi, there can only be one person to prevent, and that one who cares for nobody and wishes nobody any good. But I won't give in. That I can tell you, and the people are all in my favor. There isn't a single person down in Dörfli who will not help me, and is not against you. So take heed if you don't care to be brought before the court, uncle. There are things that might be brought up which you would not like to hear. For when a man once gets into court, many things are hunted up that he has forgotten all about. Silence! roared the uncle. His eyes blazed like fire. Take her and be gone. Never bring her into my sight again. I don't want to see her with feathers in her head and words in her mouth, such as you have spoken today. The uncle strode out of the house. You have made my grandfather angry, said Heidi. Her black eyes snapped at her aunt in no friendly way. He will soon be all right again. Now come, urged the aunt. Where are your clothes? I will not come, said Heidi. What do you say? Continued the aunt. Then she somewhat changed the tone of voice and went on in a half-friendly, half-annoyed way. Come along. You don't know any better. You can't imagine what a good time you will have. She went to the cupboard, took out Heidi's things, put them together. Now come, take your little hat. It doesn't look very well, but it will do for once. Put it on and make haste to come along. I shall not come, answered Heidi. Don't be so foolish and stubborn, like the goats. You must have learned it from them. Listen to me. Your grandfather is angry. You've just heard him say that we must never come into his sight again. He wants you to go with me now. You must not make him more angry. You haven't the least idea how lovely it is in Frankfurt, and how many things you will see there. If you don't like it, come back here. Then the grandfather will be good-natured again. Can I turn right around and come back again tonight? Oh, come along. I tell you, you can come home if you want to. Today we will go as far as Meinfeld. Tomorrow morning early we will get into the train, and in that you can get home again in no time. It's like flying. Aunt Dete took the bundle of clothes on her arm, and Heidi by the hand. They started down the mountain. As it was not yet time to go to the pasture, Peter still went to school down in Dörfli. I was supposed to go there, but he took a holiday now and then, for I thought it was of no use to go to school. Reading was not necessary, but a little wandering about, looking for large rods was profitable, because he could make use of them. So he was just coming toward his hut from the farther side, with a visible result of the day's efforts in a huge long bundle of thick hazel rods which he carried on his shoulder. He stood still, stared at the two approaching figures until they reached him. Where are you going? He asked. I am hurrying to Frankfurt with my aunt, replied Heidi. But I will first go in to see the grandmother, for she is expecting me. No talking. It is already too late, said the aunt hastily, holding the struggling Heidi fast by the hand. You can see her when you come back, so come along. Whereupon the aunt dragged Heidi off with her, did not let go, for she was afraid if she went in the child might refuse to go away, that the grandmother might take her part. Peter ran into the hut and beat on the table with his whole bundle of rods, making such a frightful noise that the whole house trembled. Grandmother sprang up from her spinning wheel in alarm and cried aloud. Peter had to give vent to his feelings. What is the matter? What is the matter? Cried the grandmother with great concern. The mother, who had been sitting by the table, was almost startled out of her wits by the noise, said in her naturally patient way, What is the matter, Peterli? What makes you so wild? Because she has taken Heidi away with her, explained Peter. Oh, where, Peterli, where? Asked the grandmother with new concern. She quickly gestured what had happened, for her daughter had told her a short time before that she had seen Dete go up the almancles. All trembling in her haste, grandmother opened the window and called out beseechingly, Dete, don't take the child away from us. Don't take Heidi away from us. Two travelers heard the voice, and Dete must have surmised what she said, for she took hold of the child more firmly than ever, and ran as fast as she could. Heidi resisted and said, The grandmother's calling. I want to go to her. But the aunt would not allow it, and pacified the child by telling her that they must hurry in order not to be late, and that the next morning they could travel farther, and she, and she could then see whether it pleased her well enough in Frankfurt to be willing to stay there. She wanted to come back home again. She could do so at once, and then she could bring something to the grandmother which would delight her. This prospect pleased Heidi. She began to hurry without further objection. "What can I bring home to the grandmother?" she asked after a while. "Something good," said the aunt. "Some lovely, soft white walls that will please her, for she can hardly eat the hard black bread any longer." "Yes, she always gives it back to Peter and says it is too hard for me. I have seen that myself," stated Heidi. "So let us go fast, Aunt Dete. Then, perhaps, we shall reach Frankfurt today, so that I can soon be back again with the walls." Heidi then began to run so fast that Dete, with her bundle in her arms, could hardly keep up with her. But she was very glad that she went so swiftly, for they were coming to the first houses in Dörfli, and there everybody would make remarks and ask questions, which might set Heidi to thinking again. So she hurried straight through, and the child pulled so hard at her hand that all the people could see that she was obliged to hasten to please the child. So she merely replied to those who questioned and called to her from every door and window, "You see I can't stop now, for the child is in a hurry, and we have still far to go." "Are you taking her away? Is she running away from the Almankel? It's only a wonder that she's still alive. Yet what rosy cheeks she has!" Such remarks as these came from every side, and Dete was glad that she came through the place without delay, without being obliged to make any explanation, but also that Heidi said never a word, but only pushed on in the greatest haste. From that day on, the Almankel looked more ill-natured than ever when he came down and passed through Dörfli. He spoke to no one. With his cheese basket on his back, his enormous staff in his hand, his thick, contracted brows, he looked so menacing that the women said to the little children, "Take care, get out of the Almankel's way, or he may hurt you." The old man had nothing to do with anyone in Dörfli, but went through there far down into the valley, where he sold his cheeses and procured his supply of bread and meat. When he passed along through Dörfli, the people all stood in groups behind him, and everyone knew some strange thing about the Almankel, how he grew more wild-looking, no longer even so much as greeted anyone. All were agreed it was fortunate that the child was able to escape. They had seen how she hurried away, so she were afraid the old man was coming after her to bring her back. Fräulein grandmother was the only one who stood by the Almankel, and she always told everyone who came up to her house to bring spinning or to get yarn how good and caretaking he had been to the child, what he had done for her and her daughter, how many afternoons he had worked about their little house, which would surely have tumbled to pieces without his help. This information also reached Dörfli, but most people who heard it said that perhaps the grandmother was too old to understand rightly about it, for she could no longer hear well, while she could not see at all. The Almankel showed himself no longer in Peter's hut. It was a good thing that it had been so well repaired, but remained for a long time untouched. The blind grandmother now began the day with sighs, and not one passed that she did not say sorrowfully, "Ah, but the child, all joy and good, have been taken away from us. The days are so empty. If I could only hear Heidi's voice once more before I die." Oh, hello, Brett. Hello, Haruki. The Hello redeem is turned off, as all other sound-related redeems or redeems I'm not doing reading stream. Doing reading, I want you and me to be able to focus on the story and to just relax. Don't want any distractions like sound. Although, thank you everyone for the head pads that were way off, as I can see now. Sorry for that. I will resume reading shortly. I just have to Will I take a drink and stuff like that? Okay, let's resume reading. Chapter 6. A new chapter and entirely new scenes. In the house of Herr Sesemann in Frankfurt reclined the little sick daughter Clara in a comfortable wheelchair. She spent the whole day in it and was pushed from one room to another. She was now in the so-called library, next to the large dining room, and here all sorts of articles were scattered about for comfort, showing that it was used as the living room. For the beautiful large bookcase one could see how it had been named, and that it was the place where the little lame girl received her daily instruction. Clara had a pale, thin face, out of which looked two gentle blue eyes, at this moment directed toward the large wall clock, which seemed to go unusually slow. For Clara, who was hardly ever impatient, now said with some uneasiness, "Isn't it time yet, Fräulein Rottenmeier?" Fräulein Rottenmeier sat very upright in her little sewing chair. She was embroidering. She wore a mysterious wrap, a large cape, a sort of cloak, which gave her a solemn appearance. It was accentuated by a kind of high dome, which she had on her head. Fräulein Rottenmeier, since the death of Clara's mother many years before, had been in charge of everything in the Sesemann household. Herr Sesemann was away most of the time, and left the whole house in Fräulein Rottenmeier's care, but with the condition that his little daughter should have a voice in everything, and that nothing should be done contrary to her wishes. Hello, Cody. Don't worry about it. We just started chapter 6. Also, hello, Ra. While Clara, with signs of impatience, was for the second time asking Fräulein Rottenmeier whether it was not time for the expected guests to arrive, Dieter, holding Heidi by the hand, standing at the entrance door below, asking the coachman Johann, who had about just jumped from the carriage, whether she might venture to disturb Fräulein Rottenmeier at so late an hour. "That is not my business," growled the coachman. "Ring for Sebastian. Inside there, in the corridor." Dieter did as he told her, and the butler, with big buttons on his coat and round eyes almost as big in his head, came down the stairs. "I would like to ask whether I may venture to disturb Fräulein Rottenmeier at this hour." "That is not my business," answered the butler, ringing the other bell for the maidinette. Without further information, Sebastian disappeared. Dieter rang again. This time the maidinette appeared on the stairs, with a little cap, dazzlingly white, on the middle of her head and a scornful expression on her face. "What is it?" she asked from the stairs, without coming down. Dieter repeated her request. Tinette disappeared, but soon came back again and called down the stairs, "You are expected." Dieter, with Heidi, then went up the stairs and, following Tinette, entered the library. Here Dieter remained politely standing by the door. She still held Heidi fast by the hand. She was not quite sure what the child might take it into her head to do in this strange place. Fräulein Rottenmeier slowly rose from her seat, came nearer, in order to scrutinize the newly arrived companion for the daughter of the house. Her appearance did not seem to please her. Heidi had on her plain cotton dress and her old crushed straw hat. Her eyes peered forth very innocently from under it, and looked with unconcealed amazement at the construction on the lady's head. "What is your name?" asked Fräulein Rottenmeier, after having looked searchingly for some minutes at the child, never took her eyes away from her. "Heidi," she replied distinctly, in a ringing voice. "What? What? That can surely be no Christian name. Then you can't have been baptized. What name was given you in baptism?" asked Fräulein Rottenmeier further. "That I do not know," replied Heidi. "What an answer!" exclaimed the lady, shaking her head. "Dieter, is the child foolish or pert?" "If the lady will allow me, I will speak for the child, for she is very inexperienced," said Dieter, after she had given Heidi a little nudge on the sly for her unbecoming answer. "She is neither foolish nor pert, for she knows nothing about it. She means just what she says. But this is the first time she has ever been in a gentleman's house. She knows nothing about good manners. She is willing and quick to learn if the lady will have forbearance. She was baptized Adelheid, like her mother, my late sister." "Well, that is a name that can be pronounced," observed Fräulein Rottenmeier. "But, Dieter, I must tell you that she is a remarkable-looking child for her age. I informed you that Fräulein Clara's companion must be of her age, in order to pursue the same studies with her and, especially, to share her occupations. Fräulein Clara is more than 12 years old. How old is this child?" "With the lady's permission," Dieter began again. "I can't quite recollect just how old she is. To be sure she must be somewhat younger, but not very much. I can't say exactly, but she may be about the 10th year, or nearly that, I should think. I am 8 now. Grandfather said so," explained Heidi. The aunt nudged her again, but Heidi had not the least suspicion why, and was not at all embarrassed. "What? Only 8 years old!" exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier with some indignation. "4 years too little! What does it mean? What have you learned? And what books have you studied?" "None," said Heidi. "What? What? How did you learn to read, then?" asked the lady again. "I have never learned to read. Neither has Peter," stated Heidi. "Good gracious! You cannot read! You really cannot read!" exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier with the greatest horror. "Is it possible that you are unable to read? What have you learned, then?" "Nothing," said Heidi, in strict accordance with the truth. "Dieter," said Fräulein Rottenmeier, after some minutes, in which she tried to compose herself, "this is not according to the agreement. How could you bring me this creature?" But Dieter was not so easily abashed. She answered eagerly, "If the lady will allow me, the child is exactly what I thought the lady wanted. The lady explained to me that she must be quite different, not at all like other children. They brought this little one. The larger ones among us are not so different. They thought this one answered the description perfectly. But I must be going. My mistress is expecting me. If she will allow me, I will come again soon and see how she gets along." With a curtsy, Dieter went out of the door, down the stairs as fast as she could go. Fräulein Rottenmeier stood still for a moment, then ran after Dieter. It suddenly occurred to her that she wished to talk with the aunt about a number of things if the child was really going to remain. And here she was, and as she saw, the aunt was determined to leave her. Heidi remained on the spot by the door, where she had stood from the first. Until then, Clara had watched everything in silence from her chair. Now she beckoned to Heidi. "Come here." Heidi went to the wheelchair. "Would you rather be called Heidi or Adelheid?" asked Clara. "My name is Heidi. Nothing else," was Heidi's reply. "Then I will always call you so," said Clara. "I like the name for you. I have never heard it before, but I have never seen a child before that looks like you. Have you always had such short curly hair?" "Yes, I think so," answered Heidi. "Did you want to come to Frankfurt?" asked Clara again. "No, but tomorrow I am going back home again to carry the grandmother some white walls," explained Heidi. "You're a strange child," said Clara. They have brought you to Frankfurt expressly to stay with me and study with me. And you see, now it will be very funny, because you don't know how to read at all, and there will be something entirely new in the study hours. It has often been so frightfully tedious, and it seems as if the morning would never end. You see, the Herr Kandidat comes every morning at 10 o'clock, and then the lessons begin. It lasts until 2, but it is so long. The Herr Kandidat often puts his book close to his face, as if he had suddenly grown nearsighted. She is only yawning frightfully behind it. Fräulein Rottenmeier, too, takes out her big handkerchief every now and then and buries her whole face in it. I can't read about yawning without yawning, I'm sorry. And buries her whole face in it, as if she were very much affected by what we are reading. But I know perfectly well that she is only yawning terribly. And I want to yawn so badly. I have to swallow it down, but if I yawn only one single time, Fräulein Rottenmeier brings the cod liver oil. It says I am getting faint. Cod liver oil is the very worst thing to take, so I prefer to smother the yawns. But now it will be less wearisome, if I can listen while you learn to read. Heidi shook her head quite thoughtfully when she heard about learning to read. But, Heidi, you must learn to read, of course. Everyone has to. The Herr Kandidat is very good. He is never cross. He will explain everything to you. But you see, when he explains anything, you don't understand at all about it. You must just wait and say nothing, or else he will explain a great deal more, and you will understand still less. But afterwards, when you have learned something and know it, then you will understand what he meant. Just then, Fräulein Rottenmeier came into the room. She had not succeeded in calling Dieter back, and was evidently disturbed by it, for she had not been able to tell her exactly in what respect the child was not according to the agreement. Since she did not know what to do to retrace her steps, she was all the more agitated, as she herself had proposed the whole thing. She went from the library to the dining room, and from there back again, and then immediately turned round and went to Sebastian, who passed his round eyes thoughtfully over the table, which was already laid, to see if there was any fault to be found with his work. Think your great thoughts tomorrow. Today, get ready for us to come to the table. These words Fräulein Rottenmeier passed by Sebastian, called Tinette, in such an ungracious tone that she came mincing along with even shorter steps than usual, stood before her with such a mocking face. Fräulein Rottenmeier herself did not dare to speak angrily to her. Her irritation increased within her. The little visitor's room is to be put in order, Tinette, said the lady with forced calmness. Everything is ready, but the furniture needs to be dusted. It is well worth while, said Tinette sneeringly, and went out. Meanwhile, Sebastian had opened the double doors of the library with considerable noise, for he was very angry, but did not dare to give vent to his feelings in words before Fräulein Rottenmeier. He then went quite calmly into the library to push out the wheelchair. While he was arranging the handle at the back of the chair, Heidi placed herself in front of him, and fixed her eyes upon him. He noticed it, and suddenly burst forth. Now, what is there so extraordinary to look at? Wailed Heidi, in a way he would not have spoken if he had seen Fräulein Rottenmeier. He was just coming into the room when Heidi replied, "You look just like Peter, the goatherd." The lady clasped her hands in horror. "Is it possible?" she groaned half aloud. "She is saying 'thou' to the servants. The creature lacks the most primitive ideas." The chair came whirling along. Clara was placed by Sebastian at the table. Fräulein Rottenmeier sat next her, and beckoned to Heidi to take the place opposite. No one else came to the table, and as the three sat far apart, there was plenty of room for Sebastian to serve his dishes. Next, Heidi's plate lay a lovely white roll. The child cast longing looks at it. The resemblance which Heidi had discovered must have aroused her entire confidence in Sebastian, for she sat as still as a mouse, and did not move until he held out the large tray and offered her the fried fish. Then she pointed to the roll and said, "Can I have that?" Sebastian nodded and glanced at Fräulein Rottenmeier, for he wondered what impression the question would make on her. In a twinkling, Heidi seized her roll and put it into her pocket. Sebastian made up a face to keep from laughing, for he knew very well that it was not allowable. He remained standing silently by Heidi, for he did not dare to speak. Neither did he dare to move away until he was bidden. Heidi looked at him for some time in amazement and then asked, "Shall I eat some of that?" Sebastian nodded again. "Then give me some," she said, looking calmly at her plate. Sebastian's face grew very thoughtful, and the tray in his hand began to tremble dangerously. "You can put the tray on the table and come back again later," said Fräulein Rottenmeier, looking severely at him. Sebastian at once disappeared. "As for you, Adelheid, I must positively give you some ideas. I see that," continued Fräulein Rottenmeier with a deep sigh. "In the first place, I will tell you how to behave at the table." The lady explained clearly and minutely everything that Heidi had to do. "Then," she went on, "I must impress it upon you particularly that you are not to speak to Sebastian at the table, unless you have some order to give, or some necessary question to ask." She then told her how she was to address the different members of the household, ending with, "Clara will tell you how she wishes you to call her." "Clara, of course," said the little invalid. Then followed a multitude of instructions about rising in the morning, going to bed, about coming in and going out, about shutting doors, and about orderliness in general. Meantime, Heidi's eyes closed, for she had been up since 5 o'clock, and had taken a long journey. She leaned back in her chair and fell asleep. Fräulein Rottenmeier finally came to the end of her instructions. She said, "Now think this all over. Have you understood everything?" "Heidi has been asleep for a long time," said Clara, looking much amused. The supper hour had not passed so quickly in a long time. "I never in all my life saw the like of this child," exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier in great vexation. She rang the bell so violently that Ned and Sebastian both came rushing in together. In spite of all the confusion, Heidi did not wake. They had the greatest difficulty in arousing her sufficiently to get her to her sleeping room, first through the library, then Clara's bedroom, then Rottenmeier's to the corner chamber, which was now ready for the little girl. How about we read one more after I have had a drink? Still have some time left. Okay. Chapter 7. Fräulein Rottenmeier has an uncomfortable day. When Heidi awoke on her first morning in Frankfurt, she could not understand what she saw. She rubbed her eyes hard, then looked up again. Everything was the same. She was sitting in a high white bed in a large room where the light came in, among long, long white curtains. Nearby stood 2 chairs with large flowers on them. Then there was a sofa with the same flowers, the round table in front of it. In the corner was a washstand on which there were things that Heidi had never seen before. Suddenly she remembered that she was in Frankfurt, and everything that had happened the day before came back to her mind. Finally she recalled quite clearly the lady's instructions as far as she had heard them. Heidi jumped from the bed and dressed herself. She went first to one window and then to the other, for she wanted to see the sky and earth outside. She felt as if she were in a cage behind the long curtains. She could not push them aside. She crawled in behind them in order to reach the window, but it was so high that her head hardly came up far enough to let her see out. Heidi did not find what she was looking for. She ran from one window to the other, then back again, but there was always the same thing before her eyes: walls and windows, then walls, then windows again. This puzzled her. It was still early in the morning, for she was accustomed to rise betimes on the elm, then to run outdoors immediately to see if the sky was blue and the sun already up. The fir trees were murmuring, and the blue flowers had opened their eyes. As a little bird placed mewing, and the as a little bird placed for the first time in a handsome glittering cage flies back and forth, tries every bar to see if it cannot slip between, fly out and regain its freedom. So Heidi kept running from one window to the other, trying to open them, for she felt that there must be something to be seen besides walls and windows. She felt sure that the ground underneath, the green grass and the last melting snow on the cliffs, must come into sight. She longed to see it. Welcome Ukraine of Ukraine? I don't know. It is reading time, so it won't be very responsive way. But the windows remained firmly closed, no matter how hard the child tugged and pulled and tried to get her little fingers under the sash. After some time, when she found that her exertions were of no avail, she gave up the plan and wondered how it would be if she were to go outdoors and around behind the house until she should come to see some grass, for she remembered that the evening before she had walked over nothing but stones in front of the house. There was a knock at the door, and Tinette immediately thrust her head in and said curtly, "Breakfast's ready." Heidi did not in the least understand that these words meant an invitation. Tinette's scornful face seemed to warn her not to come too near her rather than to give a friendly summons, and Heidi understood this and acted accordingly. She took the little footstool out from under the table, placed it in a corner, sat down on it, and waited to see what would happen. After some time she heard a bustling, and Fräulein Rottenmeier, again in a state of irritation, came and called into Heidi's room. "What is the matter with you, Adelheid? Don't you understand what breakfast means? Come down." Heidi understood this, and at once followed her. Clara had been sitting some time in her place in the dining room, gave Heidi a friendly greeting. She looked much more contented than usual, for she expected all sorts of strange things to happen that day. The breakfast passed without any disturbance. Heidi ate her bread and butter properly enough. After the meal was over, Clara was wheeled back into the library. Heidi was bidden by Fräulein Rottenmeier to follow and remain with Clara until the Herr Kandidat came to begin the lessons. The two children were alone. Heidi said at once, "How do you see outdoors, and way down to the ground here?" "We open the window and look out," replied Clara, amused at the question. "But the windows don't open," said Heidi sadly. "Well, well," exclaimed Clara, "you can't open them, and I can't help you, but when you see Sebastian, he will open one for you." It was a great relief to Heidi to know that the windows could open, that she could look out, for her room had seemed to her like a prison. Clara then began to ask Heidi about her home, and Heidi was delighted to tell her about the elm, the goats, and the pasture, and everything she was so fond of. In the meantime the Herr Kandidat arrived, but Fräulein Rottenmeier did not take him as usual into the library, for she wished to talk with him first, and so asked him into the dining room, where she sat down in front of him, and in great excitement described her embarrassing situation, and how it had come about. She had written some time before to Herr Sesemann in Paris, where he was staying, that his daughter had for a long time desired to have a companion in the house, that she herself believed that it would be an incentive to Clara in the study hours, and give her stimulating society the rest of the time. In reality, the plan was a very desirable one for Fräulein Rottenmeier herself, as she was anxious to have someone there to relieve her from entertaining the sick girl. a task which was often too much for her. Herr Sesemann had replied that he would willingly grant his daughter's wish, but with a condition that her playmate should be in every way as Clara's equal, for he would have no children tormented in his house. A really very unnecessary remark from Herr Sesemann, for who wants to torment children? She then went on to tell the Herr Kandidat how terribly disappointed she had been in the child, related all the strange things she had done since she had been in the house, proving not only that he would have literally to begin his instructions with the alphabet, but that she, too, had to commence at the very beginning in every kind of training. She saw only one way out of these unfortunate circumstances. That was for the Herr Kandidat to declare that two children so different could not be taught together without great harm to the advanced pupil. This would be a sufficient reason to Herr Sesemann, putting an end to the matter, allowing the child to be immediately sent back where she came from. He would not dare to undertake this without his consent, because the master of the house knew that the child had come. But the Herr Kandidat was very discreet, never one-sided in his judgment. He spoke many consoling words to Fräulein Rottenmeier, and gave the opinion that if the young girl was backward in one way, she might be so advanced in other ways that with well-regulated instruction they would be brought into harmony. When Fräulein Rottenmeier saw that the Herr Kandidat did not favor her, but would undertake to teach ABCs, she opened the door into the library for him, and after he had gone in, closed it quickly behind him, and remained on the other side, for she had a horror of ABCs. She strode up and down the room, considering how the servants should address Adelheid. Herr Sesemann had written that she must be treated as his daughter, and this command had to carry out, especially in regard to the servants, thought Fräulein Rottenmeier. But she was not able to meditate long without interruption, for suddenly from the library came a frightful crash as of something falling, and then a call to Sebastian for help. She rushed into the room. There on the floor everything lay in a heap. Books, copybooks, inkstand, and on top of all the rest the table cover, from underneath which a stream of ink flowed across the whole length of the room. Heidi had disappeared. "Just look at that!" exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier, wringing her hands. "Table cover, books, and a work-basket, all in the ink! Such a thing never happened before, there's no doubt about it. It is that wretched creature." The Herr Kandidat stood in perfect dismay, gazing at the destruction, which could be regarded only in one light. It was very disturbing. Clara, on the other hand, watched the unusual occurrence and its results with a look of perfect delight, and simply said by way of explanation, "Yes, Heidi did it. Not on purpose. She really must not be blamed. She was only in such a fearful hurry to get away, pulled the cover with her, so everything fell with it to the floor. Several carriages went by, one after the other, so she washed out. Perhaps she had never seen a coach before." "There, isn't it just as I told you, Herr Kandidat? The creature hasn't an idea about anything. Not a suspicion what a lesson hour is. That she ought to sit still and listen. But where's the unlucky child? She has run away. What would Herr Sesemann say to me?" Fräulein Rottenmeier dashed out and down the stairs. There, in the open doorway, stood Heidi, looking, quite perplexed, up and down the street. "What is it? What is the matter with you? Why have you run away?" demanded Fräulein Rottenmeier of the little girl. "I heard the fir trees roar, but I don't know where they are. I don't hear them any longer," answered Heidi, looking blankly in the direction where the rolling of the carriages had died away. The noise, which in Heidi's ears seemed like the raging of the wind in the firs, so that she had followed the sound in the highest glee. "Firs! Are we in the woods? What a notion! Come out and see what you have done." Whereupon Fräulein Rottenmeier went upstairs again. Heidi followed her, was very much astonished to see the great damage done. But in her delight and haste to hear the fir trees, she had not noticed what she was dragging after her. "You have done that once. You must not do it again," said Fräulein Rottenmeier, pointing to the floor. When you are having lessons, you must sit still in your chair and pay attention. If you cannot do it by yourself, I shall have to fasten you to your seat. Do you understand?" "Yes," replied Heidi. "I will sit still now," for she began to comprehend what she was expected to do. Tinette and Sebastian, by this time, had to come to put the room in order, and the Herr Kandidat went away, for all further teaching had to be given up. There had been no excuse for yawning that morning. In the afternoon, Clara always had to rest a long time, and Heidi could then busy herself as she pleased. So Fräulein Rottenmeier had explained to her in the morning. Clara had lain down to rest in her chair after dinner. Fräulein Rottenmeier went to her room. Heidi was glad to have the time to herself, for she had in her mind a plan which she was anxious to undertake, but she would be obliged to have help about it. Therefore she placed herself in the middle of the hall, in front of the dining room, in order that the person she wished to see might not escape her. Sure enough, in a little while, Sebastian came up the stairs with a large tea tray, bringing the silver up from the kitchen to put away in the china closet. When he reached the last stair, Heidi stepped up to him, saying, "I would like to ask you something," and added, as if to pacify him, "But it is really not wrong. It was this morning," for she noticed that he looked a little cross. She thought it was an account of the ink on the carpet. Sebastian then laughed so loud that Heidi looked at him in amazement, for she hadn't noticed anything amusing. "All right. Go ahead, mademoiselle." "My name isn't mademoiselle," said Heidi, a little vexed in her turn. "My name is Heidi." "That's all right. Fräulein Rottenmeier told me to call you so," explained Sebastian. "Did she? Well then, I must be called so," said Heidi resignedly, for she had noticed that everything had to be as Fräulein Rottenmeier said. "Now I have 3 names," she added with a sigh. "What did the little mademoiselle want to ask?" said Sebastian, as he went into the dining room and was putting away the silver in the closet. "How do you open the windows, Sebastian?" "This way," he replied, pushing up one of the large windows. Heidi went to it. She was too small to be able to see anything. She reached only to the window-sill. "There. Now the little girl can look out and see what there is below," said Sebastian, bringing a high wooden stool and setting it down. Heidi climbed up with great delight and was able at last to take the longed-for look out the window, but she immediately drew her head in, evidently much disappointed. "There's nothing to see at all but the stony street," said the child mournfully. "If you go clear round the house, what do you see on the other side, Sebastian?" "Just the same," was the answer. "But where do you go to see way down across the whole valley?" "You have to climb up into some high church tower, like the one over there with a golden dome above it. From up there you can see away off ever so far." Then Heidi quickly climbed down from the stool, went out of the door, down the stairs, and went out into the street. But she did not find it as she imagined it would be. When she saw the tower through the window, she fancied she would only have to go across the street. It would be just in front of her. She went down the entire length of the street, but without coming to the tower. She could no longer see it anywhere. She came to another street, then another, and so on. But still she did not see the tower. A great many persons passed her. They were all in such a hurry that Heidi thought they had no time to tell her anything about it. Finally she saw a boy standing on the corner of this next street. He was carrying a small hand organ on his back and a very strange animal in his arms. Heidi went up to him and asked, "Where's the tower with the golden dome at the very top?" "Don't know," was the answer. "Who can tell me then where it is?" asked Heidi again. "Don't know." "Don't you know any other church with a high tower?" "Certainly I know one." "Come and show me where it is." "Show me first what you will give me if I do." The boy held out his hand. Heidi searched in her pocket. He drew out a little picture on which was painted a garland of red roses. She looked at it for a little while, for she disliked to part with it. The very morning Clara had given it to her. but to look down into the valley, past the green slopes. There, said Heidi, holding out a picture to him. Will you take that? The boy drew his hand back and shook his head. What do you want then? Asked Heidi, delighted to put a picture back into her pocket. Money. I haven't any, but Clara has. She will give me some. How much do you want? 20 pfennigs. Well then, come along. She accordingly went through a long street, and on the way Heidi asked her companion what he was carrying on his back. She explained that under the cloth he had an organ which made wonderful music when he turned the handle. Suddenly they came to an old church with a high tower. The boy stood still and said, There. But how can I get in? Asked Heidi when she found that the doors were closed. Don't know, was the answer. Do you think I could ring here as I do for Sebastian? Don't know. Heidi had noticed a bell in the wall and now pulled it with all her might. If I go up there, you must wait down here, for I don't know the way back. You must show me. What will you give me if I do? What shall I have to give you, then? 20 pfennigs more. A key was turned in the old lock on the inside. The creaking door opened. An old man stepped out and looked at first surprised and then angrily at the children and said, How did you dare to ring for me to come down? Can't you read what it says under the bell? For those who wish to ascend the tower. The boy pointed to Heidi and said not a word. Heidi replied, I want to go up into the tower. What do you want to do up there? Asked the tower keeper. Someone sent you here? No, answered Heidi. I only want to go up so that I can look down. Go home and don't play any more tricks on me, or you won't get off so easily another time. Whereupon the tower keeper turned, was about to shut the door, but Heidi held him by the coat-tail and said pleadingly, Only just this once. He looked around. Heidi's eyes gazed up at him so beseechingly that he quite changed his mind. He took hold of the child's hand and said in a kindly tone, If you are so anxious to go, come with me. The boy sat down on the stone step in front of the door, signified that he did not care to go with them. Heidi, holding the tower keeper's hand, climbed many, many steps, which grew smaller and smaller. Finally, she went up an extremely narrow staircase, and then she was at the top. The keeper lifted Heidi up and held her to the open window. There, now look down, he said. Heidi saw below her a sea of roofs, towers, and chimneys. She drew her head back quickly and said in a tone of disappointment, It's not at all what I thought it would be. Is that so? What does a little girl like you know about a view? Well, now come down, and don't ring at the church door again. The keeper put Heidi on the floor, started down the narrow stairs in front of her. On the left, where they began to grow wider, there was a door which opened into the keeper's room. Close by, where the floor extended out onto the sloping roof, stood a large basket. In front of it sat a big grey cat, growling, for in the basket lived her family. She wished to warn every passer-by not to disturb her domestic arrangements. Heidi stood still, looked amazed, for she had never seen such a huge cat before. The old tower there lived whole flocks of mice, but the cat had no difficulty in catching half a dozen little ones every day. The tower keeper noticed Heidi's surprise and said, Come, you may look at the kittens. She won't hurt you while I am here. Heidi went toward the basket and screamed with delight. Oh, the cunning little creatures, the lovely kittens! She exclaimed again and again, running back and forth around the basket in order to watch the amusing frolic and play of 7 or 8 little kittens. They crawled and jumped and tumbled over one another. Would you like one? Asked the tower keeper, pleased to see Heidi dance with delight. For my own? To keep always? Asked Heidi, excited and hardly able to believe in such good luck. Yes, to be sure. You can have more than one. You can have them all if you have room for them, said the man, glad of a chance to dispose of the kittens without having to harm them. Heidi was highly delighted. Kittens would have so much room in the big house. How surprised and pleased Clara would be when the pretty creatures arrived. But how can I carry them? Asked Heidi, who was going to take some of them up in her hands at once. But the big cat jumped up on her arm and growled so fiercely that she drew back, greatly frightened. I will bring them to you. Only tell me where, said the keeper, stroking the old cat to make her good-natured again. For she was his friend, had lived in the tower with him for a good many years. To Herr Sesamann's big house. There's a golden head of a dog with a big ring in his mouth on the front door, explained Heidi. This detail was superfluous, for the tower keeper had sat in the tower for many long years, and knew every house far and wide. Besides, Sebastian was an old acquaintance of his. I know where it is, he remarked. But whom shall I bring the things to, and whom shall I ask for? You don't belong to Herr Sesemann, do you? No, but Clara will be so delighted to have the kitten. The tower keeper was ready to go on down the stairs, but Heidi could hardly tear herself away from the entertaining spectacle. If I could only carry one or two with me, one for myself and one for Clara. Why can't I? Well, wait a little, said the keeper. He carried the old cat carefully into his little room, put her into the cupboard, shut the door, and came back. There, now take two. Heidi's eyes shone with delight. She chose a white kitten and a striped yellow and white one, put one in her right pocket and the other in the left. Then she went down the stairs. The boy was still sitting on the steps outside, and the keeper had closed the door after Heidi. She said, "Which is the way to Herr Sesamann's house?" "Don't know," was the answer. Heidi then began to describe, as well as she knew how, about the front door, the windows, and the steps. But the boy shook his head. He knew nothing about it. "You see," Heidi went on, "out of one window you look at a big, big grey house, and the roof goes so." With her forefinger she described a sharp point in the air. Then the boy jumped up. All he needed was some such sign in order to find the way. Started off on the run, and Heidi after him. In a short time they stood directly in front of the door with a big brass knocker. Heidi rang the bell. Sebastian soon appeared. When he saw Heidi, he exclaimed urgently, "Quick, quick!" Heidi ran in great haste, and Sebastian closed the door. He had not noticed the boy standing disappointed outside. "Quick, Mamselle," hissed Sebastian again. "Go right into the dining room. They are already at the table. Fräulein Rottenmeier looks like a loaded cannon. But what made the little Mamselle run away so?" Heidi went into the dining room. Fräulein Rottenmeier did not look up, and Clara said nothing. There was an uncomfortable silence. Sebastian pushed up Heidi's chair, and she was once seated in her place. Fräulein Rottenmeier began with a stern face, a very solemn voice. "Adelheid, I will talk with you later. Now I have only this to say. You have behaved very badly, and really deserve to be punished for leaving the house without asking permission, without anyone knowing a thing about it, and wandering about until so late in the day. I never heard of such conduct." "Meow," sounded as the apparent answer. Then the lady grew angry. "What, Adelheid!" she exclaimed, raising her voice. "After such behavior, do you dare to play a naughty trick? You had better be very careful, I assure you." "I didn't," began Heidi. "Meow, meow." Sebastian put his tray down on the table and rushed out of the room. "That is enough," Fräulein Rottenmeier tried to say. She was so excited that her voice no longer sounded. "Get up and leave the room." Heidi, much frightened, rose from her chair and tried once more to explain. "I really didn't. Meow, meow, meow." "But Heidi," said Clara, "can you see how angry you are making Fräulein Rottenmeier? Why do you keep saying meow?" "I am not doing it. It is the kittens," Heidi at last was able to say without interruption. "What? What? Cats? Kittens?" screamed Fräulein Rottenmeier. "Sebastian! Jeanette! Find the horrible creatures and take them away!" Whereupon the lady rushed into the library, fastened the door in order to be safe, for to Fräulein Rottenmeier kittens were the most dreadful things in the world. Bastian was standing outside the door and had to stop laughing before I could enter the room again. While he was serving Heidi, he'd noticed a little cat's head peeping out of her pocket. When it began to meow, he could hardly contain himself long enough to set his tray on the table. At least he was able to go back calmly into the room, some time after the distressed lady had called for help. Everything was then perfectly quiet, peaceful. Clara was holding the kittens in her lap. Heidi was kneeling by her side, and both were playing to their great delight with the two tiny, graceful creatures. "Sebastian," said Clara as he entered, "you must help us. You must find a bed for the kittens where Fräulein Rottenmeier will not see them, for she is afraid of them, and will have them taken away. I want to keep the cunning things, and bring them out whenever we are alone. Where can you put them?" "I will take care of them, Fräulein Clara," replied Sebastian willingly. "I will make a fine bed for them in a basket, and put it where the timid lady will never come. Just leave it all to me." Sebastian went on with his work, chuckling to himself all the while, for he thought, "This is the last of it." He did not at all dislike to see Fräulein Rottenmeier a little distressed. Some time after, when it was almost time to go to bed, Fräulein Rottenmeier opened the door a very little way and called with a quack, "Have the horrible creatures been taken away?" Yes, indeed," answered Sebastian, who had kept busy in the room, expecting this question. Quickly and quietly he took the two kittens out of Clara's lap and disappeared with them. Fräulein Rottenmeier deferred until the following day the especial scolding which she had intended to give Heidi, for she felt too exhausted that night after all the preceding emotions of vexation, anger, and fright, which, in turn, Heidi had unconsciously provoked in her. She drew back in silence. Clara and Heidi followed quite content, for they knew the kitten were in a good bed. Okay, that shall be enough for today. I hope you enjoyed the story and that you were able to relax and maybe calm down a little. Maybe some of you were able to go to sleep. And I hope I'll see you next time. I will obviously not be waiting anyone as to not disturb the peace here. And I hope to see you again on Saturday. With redeems turned on, with sound alerts turned on, and to play Atelier Sophie 2, which I am very excited to do. Have a great day, or a great night, or a great whatever time of day it is. And please remember to take care of yourself and eat your veggies, alright? Bye bye!